And let's call the meeting to order. First thing on the agenda is the adoption of the agenda. Does anyone have any motions?
I move to adopt the agenda.
Second.
All right, all in favor? Please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? All right. Next is the reading of the equity statement. Does not have a name. Would somebody like to do that, please?
Sure. Columbia Public Schools, through action and in partnership with families and community, will uphold the values, policies, and practices that promote cultural competence. We will accept, embrace, and empower students and staff in their individual identities to establish and sustain human dignity, justice, and equitable treatment, and inclusiveness in the classroom and workplace.
All right, thank you. Apparently I forgot my glasses, so it'll be okay. All right, consideration of approval of minutes. Does anyone have a motion?
I have amendments.
I do too. So do you
Okay.
want to go through the amendments first and then we'll say as amended, in the end?
Yeah.
Okay, so, April, what are your suggested amendments?
On item 6, recommendation of policy EBD, and this was really a typo on my part, but the after universal precautions, the sentence that we added was comma, as determined by Director of Health Services. And that reflects correctly in the policy that's online. I just didn't get that added on there. The comma as.
Okay.
Okay. Anything else?
I think that was it for me.
All right, for my part, where it says table, it's moved in each of those times, we moved the policy, the various, items to the next meeting. So I would recommend that under 6B, 6D, 7B, C, and D, that we say move rather than table.
Okay. Can you repeat this?
Oh, yes, where it says table, we need to say move because we didn't actually table, we moved the, I'm trying to thank you. I can see as long as I hold it far enough out. But where we say table, say move to the next meeting rather than table to the next meeting.
Okay. And that's 6B, 6D, 7B, 7C, and 7D.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
Got it.
And then on 7B, it says meeting ended early. It was that members needed to leave. And I'm not sure if that we'd actually ended early, but we just had to end because members needed to leave.
Was that the same?
And
for-
we lost our quorum.
There's no set end time, right?
Right, so it's not an early, it's not a
Right.
matter of it being early, it's just that was the reason why we ended when we did.
So how should it be?
I think that should just be, honestly, I would recommend just delete those 3 words.
Meeting ended early?
Yeah, and just
Okay.
leave it, because it was because we lost our quorum, because of people who had to leave. All right. Any other questions, suggestions? Did we get those amendments down?
Yes, we're changing the table to move, and we're just taking out the meeting ended early. And we're adding as
Yep.
in policy.
Before the word determined, yeah.
Perfect, okay. All right, so I will move that we accept the meeting minutes as amended.
Second.
Jean's got it.
Is there any discussion? All right, hearing none, all in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? All right, so,
Because I wasn't present.
oh, and 1 abstention. All right, unfinished business, BDDH. BDDH was was moved back to the committee for a discussion on paragraph 5. There's a motion in the packet on that that addresses the issue as discussed by the board.
Under number
And
5. Anyway.
isn't it, hang on, it
Yeah.
is, okay.
No, but
Paragraph 5 under public comment.
Behind tab 5.
and behind that.
Yes, and behind tab 5. So the discussion, because we received some public comment and because at least one board member raised this issue, we wanted to make sure that this was very clear as to what we're saying, and we believe that paragraph 5 had a little bit of discretion that could have, basically, we gave the secretary was not sure how to handle that because we the way it was stated gave a little bit of discretion that I don't think we intended to give, in that the prior statement was that board may limit public comment to 3 comments on the same topic, whereas this amendment suggests that the board shall limit the priority of public comment to 3 comments on the same topic to allow the board to hear from community members wishing to speak on other topics. So I'm throwing that out. Do we have a motion?
So
Go ahead.
I guess I have a question first,
Mhm.
because I'm not sure we need to limit it or should be limiting it if we don't have other speakers that are trying to fill the time, like that are signed up.
This is
So-
why we put the may in the first place. We changed it once from a shall to a may.
That is what, I think I hear what you're saying, which is how this document came about. Because the idea is we shall limit the priority of public comments to 3 comments on the same topic in this order: action items, other items on the agenda, general public comment. And then additional comments on the same topic in the order that they were registered. So if you have one person that comes and speaks on the same action item 3
Right.
times, one person that speaks on other items on the agenda 3 times, other general public comment, same comment, then we could have a 4th person that comes and speaks on the same action item that was already addressed before. Does that make sense?
Yes, and I hear that. I just also, as a board member, I would still prefer to hear from someone on an item that is being voted on than the general public comments.
That's why we have action item as the first.
But I'm saying if there are 4 people that want to speak on a particular action item, and then we insert before that 4th person a bunch of general public comments, that 4th person may or may not speak. And I would prefer to continue to prioritize the person speaking on the action item.
But one of the reasons why we went with this was the previous policy committee talked about not having multiple comments repetitive in nature, so we could have 10 comments on the same action item, is what you're saying. And that's where we were trying to get away from and make it not so ambiguous as to what does the word repetitive mean and who determines what's repetitive.
Okay. What if the additional comments on the same topic went before general public comment? So you would have action items, but potentially limited to 3 on a given topic. So if there are people coming to speak on multiple
Sure.
topics,
Right.
you hear at least 3 different, or 4.
Well, I mean, if we have 10
person.
people that come and talk on 10 different action items,
Right.
you know.
All right, so let me see if I'm getting this. And does this do it, if after 2, we inserted a new 3, additional comments on the same agenda item in the order they were registered, that would move general public comment to 4, and then that would move 5 to additional comments on the same and then add the word general topic in the order they were registered.
Do we have a 5 now?
No, that's what I'm saying is that if you add a 3 after other items on the agenda, which would be additional comments on the same agenda item in the order they were registered, and then that would change 3 to 4, which is general public comment, and that would change 4 to 5, and then I would suggest adding general before the word topic.
I don't see 5. That's where I'm confused.
I'm saying to add
The three's added into the line.
I'm suggesting adding a new 3.
You're talking about adding,
Yeah, a
not
new-
just, and moving
does-
down.
does some-
I was just talking
yeah.
about flipping 3 and 4.
Oh, okay, you're suggesting, but then, okay, I see what you're saying. But go ahead.
I think this is a little bit ambiguous in the use of the word topic and action and item. Because it says, limit the priority of public comments to 3 comments on the same topic. But then the first thing is action items. So are you limiting it to the topic on that action item? Or are you limiting it to that action item? Like, if there's an action item on the agenda, we're limiting to 3 on that or on a topic on that item? It's very confusing to me.
When somebody registers, they register what topic
They register
they
a
have.
topic.
So
but
the
is
topic
that-
would be, the topic would be, for example, this contract.
But that's the agenda item.
Right.
So it is an agenda
The
item that
topic
they're
is the
registering.
agenda
Right.
item, not the top, because there could
And then it
be
says
like.
other times on the agenda. Is that supposed to be items or topics?
Oh, I'm sorry, that should say items, that's,
I'm
sorry.
sorry, I'm actually trying to
No,
understand it.
no,
So why not use the word agenda item, since that's what they're registering for, not topics?
There are 2 types of agenda items. One is an action item, and the other is an item that is not up for a
Right.
vote.
But at the top paragraph, why not say, the board shall limit the priority of public comments to 3 comments on the same agenda item
Oh, okay.
to allow the board to hear from community members which wish to speak on other agenda items or topics. You could leave topics there. Then do what you said, and it's agenda, I would add the word agenda action items, other items on the agenda, other comments on the same agenda item in the order that they were registered.
Or other comments on previously discussed, or previous, because there's 2
Yeah, you're
different
right.
things with agenda items, right? So you're
Right.
saying like either of them, it's not
Correct.
just the one
Right,
right before.
right.
I don't know what
Correct.
the best way to word that is.
And then add the general public comment. I don't know how you determine if somebody's on the same topic of the general public comment.
Well-
It sounds like a can of worms to me, but
But at
I'm not
that
a big
point-
fan of locking everything down anyway, so it
At
doesn't
that
really
point, it
matter.
would just be general public comment after that.
That's correct.
Yeah.
3, well, except if people were on different, so like, let's say I wanna talk about masks, and 2 other people are like, general,
Yeah.
when you register for general comment, do you say what your topic is?
Some people do. I'm not sure if everybody does.
Then your final, adding your final number 5 doesn't make sense if people aren't identifying the topic unless we require
That's
them to
true.
identify the topic. So is it just a free-for-all after those first 3 on just general public, and then we should leave it there?
I think that's right.
So I think
And-
Jean was right to move it, not
Yeah.
to duplicate it.
And while this seems really complicated,
It's-
and in this entire year, I don't think we've had 30 minutes of public comment
Right.
yet. It's good to have something that's clear cut so that we don't run into a case where we do have 30 people that are signed up and then we're trying to figure out which order we should prioritize. And we had, if you recall, had all agreed that action items were the most important because
Right.
we're having to take an action on them at that point in time, which is why we're prioritizing those.
Okay. So based on that, this should read, if I'm right, the board shall limit the priority of public comments to 3 comments on the same agenda item to allow the board to hear from community members wishing to speak on other topics. The board shall take comments in the following priority: agenda action items, other agenda items. Oh, no, I'm sorry, other items on the agenda. Additional comments on the same agenda item in the order they were received. And then general public comment.
Should be plural items in that last one.
Oh, yes, yes.
Or, sorry, because now I'm confused. For the new number 3, this one, are we talking about, so one, we have action items, we have just other items on the agenda, right, that are non-action items? And then if we're gonna go back, we're talking about additional comments on previously discussed
Yeah.
action items.
Okay,
That's what it should say.
Because,
okay, got it.
right, in the order they were registered. So that, because then if we're limiting the action items, we wanna go back to the action items,
Okay.
If someone wants to talk,
if someone wants
again, you know, we have 5 people that are talking on
on something.
Okay.
a vote that we're making.
So that would mean that 4 moves to 3, and we say additional comments on the previously discussed action items in the order they were received.
Which means you will not be getting previously discussed other items on the agenda, which I think is fine. You're right. I think that's right.
Okay, Paul,
Okay.
read it again.
All right, so the potential item, because we don't have a motion on the floor, is the board shall limit the priority of public comments to 3 comments on the same agenda item to allow the board to hear from community members wishing to speak on other topics. The board shall take comments in the following priority: agenda action items, other items on the agenda, additional comments on the same additional comments on the previously discussed action items in the order that they were registered, and then 4, general public comment.
I like it. And I move that we adopt that paragraph 5 to replace the paragraph 5 on the previously policy committee approved BDDH.
Yes.
Second.
Is there any discussion on that point? Okay, hearing none. All in favor of the?
Ooh, I have discussion,
Oh, no,
sorry.
go ahead. Go ahead.
We should keep the last 2 red lines, though. Speakers will not be denied.
It's already on there.
It's staying? Okay, sorry, I just saw it.
Yeah,
It's right here.
Oh, it's still there.
Yeah,
Okay,
it's
good.
all still
Okay,
there,
sorry,
because
sorry.
it actually starts discussion on action items
I
from
got
the.
it. I
okay,
apologize.
Okay,
Just turned the page and I was like,
So
oh.
I do have a question. So suppose there's an agenda item, let's say mass, and you have only 5 people signed up to talk about mass. I just want to make sure this is clear. What we're saying is, it's against policy if we allow all 5 to come talk about mass, although there is no one. We will only allow 3 according to policy. The 4th and 5th one will not be allowed to talk. I just want to be very clear on that.
You're talking about on something that we're not voting on, like if we're just.
Action item. Let's say we're voting on something with mass, to implement mass.
No, because the other 2 would then be able to speak after people could talk about other items on the agenda, before general public comment. So we would have 3 on one topic, let people talk on the other topics, then bring back the previous topic. But that way, 10 people can't talk about masks if there's additional items that on the agenda people wanna talk about.
So if there are
Because if you
no,
run out of time.
if there are no other people, if there, no one else is signed up and all 10 wanna come talk about mask,
Then they'll just all talk about masks,
Up to 30 minutes.
yeah,
up to 30 minutes.
cause that's how we limit all of it.
Up to 3 minutes,
Right.
per person,
And
so it could
30
be, it
minutes
could be,
total.
you're right, it could be more than,
It could be
it
more
could be
than 10
more than
people.
10 people, because it,
So
Right.
do we need to put that in writing in the policy?
It is.
Because we don't, tell me where it is?
The 30 minutes or the 3 minutes?
No, where if there are no other comments available and someone wants, we have 10 people signed up for mass, there's no one else coming to speak. I'm hearing you say it's okay for those 10 to speak. Do we need to have that?
that falls under additional comments on the same previously discussed action items in the order they were registered.
No
But I
more-
think what
no,
Dr. Yearwood's saying is, this is not an action item.
No, he's saying it is.
It is.
Well, that was my next point, was, so you might as well go ahead and continue.
So.
But first, let's do an action item, clear that up.
So the action item, I think the policy allows it clearly.
Okay.
What it does not specifically allow, or say specifically, is that the non-action items on the agenda, that we have space to allow for more than 3. But I think an argument could be made that those are essentially, they're like general public comment.
Yeah.
Right? So other items on the agenda, because they're non-action items.
Can I
I don't think it's
Through-
prohibited.
talk through an example?
It is, because we use the worksheet.
So we have 3 people that sign up that they wanna talk about the bus contract that we're going to vote on. Then we have 6 people who sign up to talk about the CSIP report, which is not an action item. What we're saying is we would allow the 3 people to talk on the action item on the bus contract. And then we would allow the first 3 people to talk about the CSIP report. Then would we go to general public comment? Or,
If there's no one else signed up for an action item, then it would move to general public comment.
and then after that was done, go back to,
To your point, I think we should, because you're right, that does not clear up what we're talking about. I think number 4 should say general public comment and other previously discussed other items on the agenda in the order that they were received, so that is all one bucket.
And we could change other items on the
Right.
agenda to non-action items. So that we don't have to keep saying over again,
And
all
other
other items on the agenda.
And other non-action items.
Make it
I
action
don't
items
think
and
in that
non-action
case it has
items.
to be previously discussed, because people could be talking about different
agenda
Okay.
items on
And
the.
other,
It doesn't really matter if they're the same or different items from the agenda.
and other items on the agenda in the order they were received. Is
Do
that-
we care whether they're talking about an agenda item or general public comment if it's not an action item? Cause you could just put those together if you don't care.
So like,
initially we do, I
Okay,
think.
fair.
I mean, wouldn't you agree? I mean,
I
I
think
would,
so, cause I think like
That's
there's
fair.
sometimes where now if we're doing a lot more first reads of contracts or things like that, that's an opportunity to get feedback from people on some of those contracts, things like that, like a
Prior to
meeting
us voting.
before
Then I
the
think
voting.
Paul is right, that you can just,
But when you get to that final bucket,
Then it's just everything
then it's just
else.
everything else.
Does that clarify
Yes.
what you were saying?
Yes.
Okay,
I think
so the order would then be, just to reiterate, agenda items, or agenda action items. Number 2, other items on the agenda. Number 3, additional comments on the previously discussed action items in the order that they were registered. Number 4, general public comment and other items on the agenda in the order they were received.
And other
And-
non-action agenda items, right?
well, no, because you gotta change it in both places, so that's fine, I think
Yeah.
that's correct. So you won't
Yeah.
you won't take more than 3 general comments on the topic.
General public comment is, I feel like kind of a free-for-all because people don't necessarily always say what they're talking about.
Oh, okay.
So there's not
Yeah.
necessarily a
Oh,
way
that's
to.
Yeah, we won't necessarily know what the topic is, so I think
So
that,
how are you gonna limit it to 3 on any topic?
I think that 4 is the free-for-all. Is that isn't unlimited, it's general comment or anything
It's
else
just
on
sort
the
of
agenda.
Oh, it's gonna be in the same
Yeah,
number form.
yeah,
Got it.
that they're both in 4, so that they're just taken in the
But my
order they received.
concern is, I'm so sorry.
No, no.
My concern is,
BDDH.
my concern is that the beginning of this says that you're limiting it to
You're limiting the
3
priority.
comments But but it says you're limiting it to 3 comments on the same agenda. Oh, I see, we're not limiting the general public comment.
We're limiting
Just
the
that was my
priority.
original change.
Yes,
Okay.
yeah, because that, we had the,
I just
yeah,
fixed
if
myself
you-
for-
yeah, we had had that discussion
Yeah, got it.
2 meetings ago. Yeah.
Okay, yep.
You may not have been here for that one.
What's old is new
Yeah,
again, or something like that, yeah. got it.
Okay. Does everyone know what the
No, read it again.
Okay. Discussion, okay, I'm just gonna read the whole thing
Read the
so
whole
that we
thing.
have it. Discussion on action items from the posted agenda will be prioritized, period. The board shall limit the priority of public comments to 3 comments on the same agenda item to allow the board to hear from community members wishing to speak on other topics. The board shall take comments in the following priority. Agenda, number 1, agenda action items. 2, other items on the agenda. 3, additional comments on the previously discussed action items in the order that they were registered. 4, general public comment and other items on the agenda in the order that they were received. Speakers will not be denied the opportunity to speak on the basis of their viewpoint. Speakers must follow the expectations in the section titled Conduct at Public Meetings.
Your final number 4, should it say in the order that they were registered?
Oh,
or
I'm
that
sorry,
they were
that should say registered.
So in both for 3 and
Yes,
4, it's
it-
about the order they were registered.
It should reflect the same language, yes. Yeah.
I move we adopt that into policy BDDH1 that we previously approved to replace that paragraph 5.
Okay, do I have a second?
Second.
Is there any further discussion? Hearing none, all in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? All right.
Move
What-
that sucker to the
Meredith, I'm
June
going
meeting.
to, I have this written down, I'm gonna take a picture with my camera so that I have it.
Since
And
you
then
can't
I am
see it.
going to, hand it to you, and if you have any questions about my chicken scratch.
I actually got it all this time, but
Just
that's
wanna
good
make
to
sure.
have.
There you go.
Oh, June meeting. And for the June meeting, it will be for final read. For the June board meeting?
Yes, because we've already had a first read, which is why it got sent back to us after that.
So it'll be for
That's,
final read
that's
and
the recommendation.
approval.
We're recommending that it go for final read because we already had the first read in the meeting. We had the discussion, which brought it back to us. Now it can go for final. All right, so,
IKE.
thank you, thank you. Okay, IKE is the next, item on the agenda. And let me get to that in my materials. What item is that under in the tabs?
Under 5.
Five.
Under
Okay,
5,
it's
it's
right
right
after.
after,
Okay.
it's right after.
Ah, got it, okay. All right, is there any discussion on IKE? Before we, make a motion?
The only question I had was in October, the board approved the last paragraph of policy and now administration is recommending the removal of that paragraph and I was just wondering why.
Do any of our guests have a reason? Thank you for coming to
You're
respond.
welcome, happy to be here. We thought it was much more expressive of our intent to really look at, especially 3rd grade retention. It became, I don't wanna say forceful, that's not the right word. It was the paragraph that we switched, the green paragraph, it was much more solid from an academic perspective.
And included something more than just 3rd grade.
Right, yeah. So, and we also wanted to include teachers are going to be in this. Now, we had more in this and we were advised to, let's put that somewhere else because, okay. So this is taken on, 12 different iterations and this is what
Oh,
we have.
yes, we feel your pain.
Okay, that's not my pain, I'm just being honest with you. So we just felt it was much more specific in the areas of improving literacy and math.
Overall.
Overall, correct.
Alright. I just wanted.
So the replacement paragraph
Yes,
allows, you can does not limit it to looking at reading deficiency at third grade, but broadens it so you can look at both math and reading in a multitude of grades,
Correct,
specifically under the policy.
yes.
All right, anything else? I've got one if nobody does, and I don't want to offend Dr. Yearwood, but in our policies, we call our scholars students. And so I think we should be
Oh,
consistent
that's-
across our policies.
That's my
And
fault,
certainly
sorry.
if we want to change it globally at some point, we can have that discussion. But in this policy, we call them students throughout the policy, so I'm sorry, Dr. Yearwood, that's.
I appreciate
That's-
and I do concur.
That's not on him, that's on me. My apologies.
No, I get it. It's just I want to be consistent in the policies.
Yes, yes.
So, okay.
So whereas we previously, this was made by a building administrator, now teachers are also gonna be making that determination?
But we'll be a part of the committee.
Yeah.
What we're saying, it'll be a collective, so the teachers' input along with principals' input to be able to make that determination. Because that's, yeah, go ahead,
It will still be on the principal is the last
Yeah.
person.
input from the
Yeah.
teachers, yeah.
So Carla, in the next one that we're doing, IGAB AP1, we identify more of the team. And so it's not just teachers and the principal, it's the team, it's the reading specialist, it's the homeschool communicator, it's the counselor, et cetera.
And the one you're talking about will be an internal procedure versus a board policy.
Correct.
Right.
Well, maybe I'm just misreading this, but I don't understand. This deemed beneficial by both teachers and the principal? Are you telling me I'm gonna in a minute see what deemed beneficial means?
Well, deemed beneficial will be in our internal procedure.
So am I gonna see that in a minute, or?
No.
So we don't see that, and can parents see that internal procedure?
They will, yes,
They will if their child's being retained?
I imagine so.
But
yes.
not like, and just a regular parent can't just say, I'd like to see this internal procedure about what the
No, I
word
mean,
deemed beneficial
no,
means?
no, they'll be able to see it at any point in time, because obviously, we don't wanna retain, our scholars or students, and as such, the more information we can put out there about how not to retain will be
Right.
beneficial, so no, we're not gonna keep it, a secret. What's happening here is, it's sort of allowing us to, not put into policy practices that we may end up changing based upon new data and new information and just additional things. So when we say, where it is deemed beneficial, that deemed beneficial is sort of left open for us. For example, you may have a scholar who missed 3/4 of time at school, comes in and aces every single exam in it. Well, are they just a good test taker, or did they really retain the information and so on? They just.
Well, I guess that's actually kind of what I'm concerned about, is
Yeah.
like, that opens it up to a lot more biases by classroom teachers and administrators in
So-
terms of what deemed beneficial is, whether it's related to behavior, or whether it's related to academics, or whether it's related to, missing a lot of class. And that makes me a little nervous to take that out of policy.
So one of the things that goes along with this is extensive parent communication. So that deemed beneficial will be on a letter, and we will ask for principals to meet with parents and explain, like, hey, you're reading at a kindergarten level, you're in third grade. Or, so that leaves kind of the door open to be much more expressive and give parents much more information. I totally get what you're saying.
Well, I mean, I'm fine, if it's related to academics, then I
Right.
see your point, but in the example that Dr. Yearwood
Yeah.
gave, if like my child is absent but is still performing academically at grade level, then I have more concern with that being a reason. Or if my child is just deemed that their behavior is too immature or not appropriate for school such that they need to be in third grade or second grade or kindergarten another year.
Yep.
I don't have a problem with the academic side of things, and that's why the deemed beneficial is too broad for me.
Would you like it to say deemed academically beneficial?
I mean, I think, Jean.
Sure, I was just gonna say, the couple of sentences before that, I feel like maybe it all should be a single paragraph. with,
Okay.
Like, because the things before that, it says retention may be considered when, in the judgment of the professional staff, it is in the best educational interest of the student involved. Parents, guardians receive prior notification and explanation, however, final decision rests with the school administration. So I'm wondering if that piece about judgment of the professional staff, that it's in the best educational interest of the student involved, needs to be what replaces this, like, however, in cases where it's deemed beneficial by both teachers and principal.
I
Because-
preferred the academic rather than educational
Than
benefit, because the educational benefit can also be maturity or missing class or whatever.
Right.
So let's, want to talk about that for just a second. So right now, we have a problem on attendance. Right, or attendance is suffering because scholars aren't coming to school. And we know that research has shown us that scholars that attend 90% of the time are liable to perform at higher levels. So you may have a scholar that's coming in and is capable of performing at a higher level, but because of their attendance, they're performing at a much lower level. And so what we do, or what we encourage, is conversations between administration, teachers, and parents and scholars to say, hey, we need your child in school. I'll be honest, when I met with my teacher advisory groups, one of the problems that they said was very clearly, we had elementary kids whose parents said, I'm bringing it. I'm gonna bring him when I wake up, and I'll get there when I can. And so they're spending more time having to reteach and get to that scholar, instead of us saying, hey, look, we need your child here, and you need your child here on time to school, so that we can provide the best educational opportunity. However, if you keep saying, I want to
But
speak
is
to
it your,
10.
is it your position that students should be retained if they have poor attendance without other issues?
If it shows that their academic starts lacking or lagging behind, like that example that I used perhaps was not the best one, but let's say I do have an A student who,
Right, then
Yeah.
then it'll be covered under adding the word academic performance.
but we have to put some teeth into it with our attendance as well.
I-
Because if.
This isn't an attendance
Yeah,
policy.
because if they're not attending school, so basically what we're trying to get at is, then we're saying attendance isn't important, so don't come to school as long as you can maintain good grades.
So I guess I hear that concern. I also think that when we're talking about acceleration and retention of students, like specifically to the point, right, where we were talking about like reading deficiencies at the end of third grade, because we know that those elementary years, right, are setting them up for further things. That's about the skills that they have and acquire. And if we know that it is parents that are the ones that are bringing or not bringing students, if the student has the skills and they're performing appropriately academically, punishing the student by retaining them because their parent isn't getting them to school, to me feels really punitive and not effective. If their academic performance is suffering, I think that's different. And so I would agree with Anne in terms of like the rationale for the terminology there, because if their academic performance is suffering, we know that that is gonna have ripple effects down the road. That's a real reason to hold them back. If a second grader, and our attendance is a different issue. I think there's a different way to deal with the attendance piece for those families. I don't know, that's my.
So there's a correlation between attendance and academics. We show that our students
Yes.
who are at 90% attendance are 3 and 4 times likely to be successful
Right.
in reading and math.
Correlation's not causation, though.
Well,
And it doesn't apply
well-
to every child such that we would wanna penalize every child.
but that's
for that.
debatable though, because you can't say it is not. You can't definitively, but the research that we have read and looking at all statistics, it shows that. That's what all the students that are there 90% of the time, their data and their scores are 3 times higher than those that are not.
But if
So we do have
someone's
statistics.
score is low,
Then they can be held
regardless of
academic.
whether
Whether they're
there or not.
I'm sorry?
that's- If their score is low,
If that's
Right.
true, if it causes their score to
regardless
go
of
down.
whether they're there or not,
Mhm.
that's your academic performance. So retention is based on academic performance, not attendance,
Okay.
right?
I don't
Because we
think-
want to help students,
So
not penalize them.
So what this allows us to do is have a conversation around attendance. We don't want to wait, the academics is the summative, it's the end product of where our scholars are. What we want to do is have basically formative or have we call it information that we know we can talk to parents about leading up to poor academic performance. And if we're saying we're strictly only going on attendance, then that carries the message, guess what? You don't have to bring him to school, bring him whenever you want to, just as long as he can pass a test or do whatever, and then you'll be fine. That has some serious in-depth implications on the academic front.
But isn't that what SRG tells us? I mean, whether they come to school or not is not something that is accounted for. It can't be part of their grading. It's not a part of their grading. I mean, I have a student who missed 27 days. He's still a National Honor Society member. So while the school can reach out to me and say, we're concerned and, he has a higher chance of not being able to be successful because he's not here, and maybe scare me into thinking that if I don't get him there, he's gonna be retained. I mean, I think it goes back to academic performance. Yes, a child who's not there is not going to be performing at the level, most likely, that they are capable of doing. But to retain them, if we're trying to say, if you have a lot of days that you're missing, where we could potentially retain you, kind of goes against the exact opposite of SRG.
I have a suggestion because I think, I'm trying to synthesize what everyone says. I think that the deemed beneficial is very vague. And that I think is where the issue here. I'm wondering if it should say something like, in cases where it is the judgment of the professional staff that it is in the best interest of the student.
Okay.
And then move on, because I think we need to focus on what the best interest is of the student.
Yes.
Not,
Yes.
and deemed
Yes.
beneficial,
Right.
deemed beneficial to whom?
Right.
And I have a
Yes.
concern that it's deemed beneficial to staff, the perception at least will be, you're doing it because it's beneficial to you, not the student. And I'm hearing from you that it's in the best interest of the student,
Yes.
and that's the language we used earlier in the policy.
Yes, I like that.
Except that it's still not in the best interest of a student to be retained if they're performing academically. So I feel very strongly that academic component has to be in there, because what I'm hearing from administration is that it will be used to, in essence, I don't wanna say threaten, because I know that's not what you mean, but it will be used to motivate parents to get their kids there by telling them that there's a potential for retention.
I mean, some parents will take it that way.
What about that last line? When we kind of integrate that last line, it is believed that they would benefit from further instruction and development. At that,
I think that would stay there. Yeah, what I would suggest.
that's like the true intention of that paragraph,
How about
right?
just further academic instruction,
There's no way that
or further instruction?
we would be able to take every scholar, student, kid who doesn't have 90% or greater attendance and even think about retention.
Right.
Oh, of course.
Right.
That's reality.
No, I'm not
I understand what you're
suggesting that.
saying with well, this is the letter of the law, this is what's written. I'm just saying in our world that.
I understand that, but I'm not worried about every student who has problems with attendance. I'm actually worried about how it increases the ability, because we can't do it to everybody, it increases the opportunity for inequitable treatment, because who are we going to do it for? Who are we making decisions about doing it to, and on what basis? If I have two kids that have both missed kind of 90%, whatever the days are, who have both missed that, how do I make the decision about who's being considered for retention and who's not is more concerning.
And that's where regulations.
And that's why it should be academic, that's how I should be considered.
Right.
That's why our regulations that we are developing and on the separate cover, that's where that's gonna come in. But I like what
Right.
Paul said. I like his assumption, because at the end of the day, we want to act in the best interests of our students. That's it, bottom line. That's it. And I'll share this. Where I'm from, Texas, there's an attendance policy. It says that if you miss more than 90% of the time, you could be considered for retention. To have 90-something% attendance out of schools is nothing. You'd have 92, 93, 94. Why? Because parents are getting them to school so that we can educate them. So that is something that, based upon perception, or we have to look at the net effect on the educational process along the way. Because if they're not there, every day that a scholar misses is the equivalent of 3 days of instruction, every single day. So for us to say, well, scholars not coming could lead to outstanding performance, no. I don't see that. But I will stand back, and I would agree with Mr. Harper on his statement. I think that sums it up for me. I'm happy with that.
I think,
Can I
so,
please-
go ahead, Carla.
So, on the green paragraph, that first sentence, scholars are expected to advance through each academic year, progressing to the next grade level annually. Seemingly could be the first line under retention. And then you go into those next couple of sentences, and it covers the educational aspects. And then policy JEA, which is compulsory and part-time attendance, which addresses mandatory attendance as required by the law. If we wanted to look at that separately.
JGA?
JEA.
JEA, okay.
For something that has more teeth as far as compulsory attendance, I think that should be a separate conversation than retention.
We don't have it.
Okay.
If that makes sense.
Yeah, I just, we don't have it, so I agree.
Oh, this one?
JGA.
Oh, no, I'm
Yeah.
I'm on mine.
Okay, okay.
I'm in our
Oh,
policies, yeah. JEA.
Well, and I think whatever, we decide to do, writing regarding, as specifically as it addresses attendance, it should go along with the philosophies that we're currently using. And I agree with Dr. Yearwood about, what they're doing in Texas. But it goes exactly opposite against our philosophy of SRG that we've done for the last 8 years. So they need to sync up.
I like the edit that Ms.
Move
London
that
Yes,
proposed.
I thought that was
Moving that
yeah.
one sentence, I think because then you have however the final decision will rest with the school administration, however in cases where it's deemed beneficial by both teachers and principals, so there needs to be a little edit.
Oh, but not the deemed
I would
beneficial,
take
we're
those
gonna
two
change.
lines out.
Yes.
The-
Oh, take
However,
the-
in cases where
Yes.
it's deemed
Oh, I see
beneficial,
what you're saying,
I would
move it
just
to
take
the
that
front
first
and
sentence,
use
scholars.
the other piece of it.
Yeah, because
Yeah,
that
I
speaks to
agree.
the educational.
I agree.
Yeah,
under
I'm fine with
retention.
that too.
What do we have?
So, let me just make sure I understand. So what you're suggesting is, under the word retention, the first sentence should be, students are expected to advance through each academic year, progressing to the next grade level annually, and leaving in everything that is currently there,
Yeah, retention may be considered.
and then not having the however sentence.
Correct.
Yeah.
So the
So
full,
from
did
the-
you read
it's
the
addressed.
full thing, how the full
So,
thing?
okay,
would
so students are expected to advance through each academic year, progressing to the next grade level annually. Retention may be considered when, in the judgment of the professional staff, it is in the best educational interest of the student involved. Parents/guardians will receive prior notification and explanation concerning the retention. However, the final decision will rest with school administration.
Yes.
And then that's the end of the policy,
Yes, yes.
period.
Yes,
You like-
yes, that's good.
Love it.
I think that sounds much better, and I just feel like I wanna say one thing, and that is that I agree with you about attendance, Dr. Yearwood, I absolutely do, I think attendance is very important. But I also think that it's very important for us not to have an adversarial relationship with parents, thinking that parents are always to blame for the attendance of their children. And so both society, illnesses, family emergencies, and we as a community can't solve the attendance problem until we figure out the busing problems, till we figure out so many other things that are the reasons that aren't always because parents are, just like, oh, I'll just bring them in whenever. But there are a lot of pressures from society that cause students to miss school. So I just want to make sure that that we're on the same side in terms of knowing attendance is important.
Partner with
Even
them.
if we think why is not always the same reason.
And JEA goes into.
Thank you.
That the district expects regular and honest communication from the parents regarding absences. So
Yeah.
I think we cover a lot of that in JEA.
Carla, would you like me to try and,
Something
it,
like
I didn't have it on for this year yet, but, cause it had been revised 10 years ago. And so it wasn't up yet, so would you like me to maybe put that on for June if we wanna?
I think it's not a
Or-
bad idea if we're talking about the
Okay.
importance of attendance, and then we
Okay.
can look at some of the,
Okay.
that does talk about the requirements of the state compulsory education law, so it's
Yeah.
pretty.
We should probably check and make sure, no.
So what do we want to do for IKE for today?
Whatever you just said.
Make that.
Do we want to do the Ms. London edit, or do we want to move it to next month?
Let's go with that.
Yeah.
Miss London
Okay.
had it.
We will do
And
the,
this other edit too, right?
oh, yeah, it would be changing the green here to what we just said, but including what was already edited from administration.
So we're taking out one sentence, putting it up front, doing away with the green.
Yes.
Okay, perfect.
Yes.
Okay.
So does anyone have a motion?
I move to accept the edit as listed under remediation as a condition of promotion and the edit as proposed by Ms. London under retention
And red.
and read by Mr. Earl.
Yes.
Second?
Is there any further discussion? Hearing none, all in, oh,
Sorry.
nope, go ahead. I'm
Are we-
too quick sometimes.
Would this be for a recommendation for first read or a recommendation for final read? It's limited changes, and so I'm wondering what we are
Usually,
potentially recommending.
usually leadership ends up, something like this, I think oftentimes ends up on consent. Are you suggesting that it not be put on consent?
I'm fine with it. I'm just wondering if we're giving a recommendation as well, or if we're just approving the language. The motion was just to approve the language, so
Right.
I guess I'm asking, should the motion be amended, or should there be another motion, or does there need to be, or what has we been doing? Sorry.
Typically, we've been approving, we have done those recommendations, but typically we just approve the language. But if you feel strongly that it needs to go to on a different place, we can make that recommendation.
I do not. I was just
Okay.
curious. Sorry, I was just trying to figure out where we were on everything.
Yeah, typically we've just been approving the language and letting leadership decide, but we have made a few recommendations.
Okay, so in this case, I'm
On
just
consent.
approving the language.
Yeah.
Consent, okay.
Okay.
Okay. All right. Any other discussion? I don't want to cut anyone off. All right. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? All right, perfect. Next on the agenda is,
You're most welcome.
and thank you for the comments, is JGD. Yeah, you can have it. You can have it. I'll muddle through. It'll all be good. And let's see, what was the recommendation on JGD from administration? Oh. Okay, does anyone have any discussion on JGD, which is student suspension and expulsion?
Item number 6, I still do not know what the word also means.
Where was that in from? Number 6?
Item number 6, if a student is suspended for more than 10 school days, the following rules also apply. Also to what on the previous 2 pages? I would contend that also does not apply. Because only a superintendent can suspend a child for more than 10 days. And so,
I think under 6, there's a hearing.
right, but when I read this, because this was the problem I had before. If a student is suspended for more than 10 school days, the following rules also apply. And so then I look, as a parent, I look at this policy and I go, okay, also to what? What were the other things I'm supposed to do? And I just contend, we just take out the word also. Because I find it confusing,
I
but.
think, like, under number 5, right, up to 10 days, the appeals process is more building driven.
Right.
I think is where it goes to the board, right, for the superintendent's decision.
I think what April is saying, 5 now, the way it's edited, obviously only applies to up to 10 days, and 6 now applies to more than 10 days. So the word also makes it confusing as to what also modifies. But by removing it, it's 5 applies to up to 10 days, 6 applies to more than 10 days.
Right.
So I think, if I'm recalling, because I remember having some discussion about this, is that there's a process when it's like 3 days or so where they have to appeal it through the administrator and so on. And what we're saying is that if it's more than 10 days, they still can go through that appeal process. But in addition to that, here's the steps that we're following. Tell me if I'm off, Carla. I'm just.
So then I think it needs to read that if the student is suspended for more than 10 school days, they first, like, the rules for up to 10 days apply, and then the following rules apply.
You can't appeal to someone who didn't have the authority to.
Oh, right, that's what we were
Issue the
discussing, that's what I
suspension.
was saying last time.
So
Yeah, just kidding.
to me,
I
the
knew that.
only thing that, if my kid's suspended for 10 days, I don't care what the first 2 pages say. I want to know what applies to me. And so if my kid's suspended for 10 days, then I can appeal the superintendent's decision. because
10
the
days, you're still in
superintendent-
number 5, more than 10 days.
Yeah.
Yes,
does
more
the
than
law
10
actually
Yeah,
say?
you're right. April,
Right.
you're right.
Do you know what I'm
You're right.
saying?
Yes,
Yeah.
yes. So we should take out the word also?
I
Yeah, that's, I think that's all
Yeah,
that
yeah, yeah,
April's
yeah.
suggesting there.
Yeah, yeah.
And the step 1 that I'm looking at, I think step 2 makes a lot of sense, but step 1, does it make sense to it? Because the principal's already supposed to have informally tried to deal with things. Does it make sense to have an informal appeal before you appeal to the same person who made the decision before you go to the superintendent? Or should we just have step 2 be the one step there?
Where are you talking?
Under 5, I'm sorry.
Under 5, item B?
Yeah,
Under D. I think.
under
You just
D,
crossed out.
under D.
Oh, sorry.
Oh, yeah, now C. It's,
Oh my God.
there's a step 1 and a step 2 now as modified. I'm wondering if really that should just say the appeal goes to the superintendent and that's the one, you get one bite of the apple essentially.
For the 10 days or more.
For under 10 days.
Oh, no, well, typically,
You want those.
no, we don't, because at that level, it's the decision maker who would be the principal, because principals are allowed to suspend up to 10 days.
Right.
So what we're saying is you can go back and appeal to that person before it works its way up to the superintendent. That's what we're saying. Whereas 10 days or more, it's my decision, you come to me. That's why we have the distinction. Yes.
So,
Are you saying number 1 is the same as 5?
No, step 1.
No,
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 I'm talking about
under
number.
5, the appeal of a more than, or an up to 10 days goes directly to the person who made it's 5C, step 1.
Right, but are you saying that's the same as what happens in number 1 up here at the top of the page?
Well, what I'm saying is what we're doing is we're appealing to the person who made the decision, not to somebody who can overturn that decision.
so is there someone that would be between, because I saw like there's some language that was in and then taken out and things like that, of executive director, chief of schools, right, something like that. Like, it doesn't seem like it would necessarily jump to the superintendent.
Right.
There should be another layer in there. I'm not sure exactly who that person is. I think also, I agree, which came up last week too, that step one, it's not informal at that point. Once they've been suspended, there's
They've
nothing
been
informal, so
suspended.
either it's an appeal or the step's not there. Because step two says if the appeal is not resolved in step one, it doesn't say it's an appeal in step one.
Oh, right.
It says any student who feels he or she has a justifiable appeal should discuss it with the appropriate building administrator. But that's the same administrator who suspended them.
But you still wanna give that administrator a chance to hear.
I mean,
Have
people
they
do
not
change-
already?
Yeah, but people do change their
Right,
Right,
minds.
so I'm fine for them then to appeal, but then we should be clear that that is the appeal. Like, that a student who feels they have a justifiable case can appeal the decision with the building administrator first. But to say like, I think I have a justifiable appeal, so I'm gonna go discuss it, to me feels very vague. And I think the other thing, I very, very much appreciate that you, like, cutting the steps out to condense the time, and also condensing the time that replies have to be resolved in, and I don't want to hamstring our principals and our assistant principals. I get that people get really busy. But I do feel like maybe there needs to be some sort of time frame in terms of when the official notification is made to the parents and guardians. And that is not included here. It just says official notification is made to them in writing,
Where are you looking right now?
5A.
Right, but.
And then that they should be provided the opportunity for a personal conference and conditions that people can be permitted to reenter school. And again, there's no time frame. So again, even if it's like a 10-day suspension and they get the notice to like a day, I mean, I would assume they have to be notified within 24 hours because they need to know their kid is not supposed to go to school. So a kid, especially a high schooler, doesn't get on the bus or leave the house and the parent doesn't know.
They're
So-
99.9% of the time called right then, because you're having to tell the parent that the child can't come to school
Right,
the next day.
and so I
If
guess.
they can't reach them, that's the
Right.
main reason.
So, and then in terms of like when is the conference scheduled, right? So if they're suspended for 10 days, we'll just give them the most amount of time, right? And the parent calls and says, I wanna schedule a conference, and they get told, on a Thursday or something, and they get told, okay, I can meet with you next Tuesday. I understand everyone's busy, but like at that point, you're already 3-4 days into a suspension, right? So if you're trying to appeal so I know that's not necessarily just about the appeal. At least it doesn't appear that way from how it's written. And I know that it's complicated because like a 2-day suspension, maybe people aren't appealing it.
Right.
Anyway.
My concern would be having that in a policy versus a procedure. Because if for whatever reason they can't get to you till Tuesday, then they'd be in a policy violation situation versus legitimately in meetings from dawn to dusk.
Right, I guess two things. One, then, like, even if it's not a specific time, is at least inserting language that might say like, as
Best reasonable efforts.
best reasonable, like as soon as possible with best reasonable efforts or whatever it needs to be. And then the other one, I guess, would just be,
I mean, we have lots of ones that have date numbers and I'm like X number of days. I don't see how this is any different, why we can't have, it says notified. I don't see why we can't have days in there.
I have a question, I have a quick question, just for clarification. So we're talking about 5A, but when we look at step 1, the very last sentence in step 1, that's not appropriate? I'm just asking for clarification.
Well, step one has to do with the student filing an appeal with the appropriate building administrator. But prior to actually filing the appeal,
5A.
they're supposed to be notified in writing of
the guardian.
the suspension and given an opportunity for a conference.
But that is the notification.
Right, and this is the notification, and then step one is, step one is a little unclear, because it talks about discussing the appeal with the building administrator. We can't resolve it informally at that point, because they've already been suspended.
So, should the line, sorry, go ahead.
No, you're fine.
Should the line in number one, the student shall have the right to appeal through the appropriate levels of administration, even be there, because that's before they've been suspended?
Yeah, I think there's a lot of confusing words, so can I throw out just a couple of things that might
Please.
add a little bit of clarity? So first, 2 and 3 should be flipped. If we're going chronologically, before suspending a student, number 1, right? The administrator has to do all these things. Then they should determine whether the student should be suspended. That should be step 2, right? Then, if they've concluded that it is possible, the following procedures should apply.
You're right.
So if we just flip 2 and 3, that's gonna clear up a lot. Then why is 4 not one of the procedures? I've now decided to suspend you. Here are the procedures I have to follow. And the first one is notify parents
Promptly.
promptly, and then we'll get back to
covers
like, what
my-
does that mean?
I'm okay with promptly because I think there is a reasonable
Yeah. Agreed.
agreement of sort of.
But
what
that should be one of those specific procedures referenced in number 2.
So
And
it
now
is
we
like
have a
part
list of
A.
procedures, starting with prompt notification, which is repeated again in A with official notification, or maybe, are those different? Is prompt notification and official notification different?
I will just say that I think some of that, the last point you just made was because the language of this policy originally said 3 days and 10 days was when 5 kicked in. So
Ah.
there was a period of time where there was 0, 1, and 2. This has now been shifted.
So it's just repetitive now.
So yeah, now it's no longer needed to be written that way.
MSBA doesn't have any procedure to appeal if it's 3 days. In fact, MSBA's number 5 says, any suspension by a principal must be reported immediately and in writing to the superintendent, who may revoke the suspension, either part or in full at any time. There,
Do we not have that anymore? Like, we decided not to include that, I'm sorry, I missed
I
that.
don't think that's
That
in-
never
okay.
has been in our policy.
It's never been in
Oh,
our
okay.
policy.
But that's what MSBA
And
has.
Got it.
MSBA doesn't have any guidelines
For the appeal process.
for the appeal process on a period of up to 10 days.
Well, I love that we have that.
That is something that we have, but
But 4
That we're
and
struggling
A are basically the same thing. 4 and 5A are basically the same thing and should be combined after you switch 2 and 3. And that might solve Jean's problem with promptly notify, because it would be encompassed in
Right,
it.
it would be
Should,
part of it.
but
And-
should 4 actually, should we not have A and have 4 so that it applies to both the up to 10 days as well as the 10 days and later? Because there's nothing that says under 6, there's nothing that talks about notification.
Well, that's also
I guess
that
that's
April is concerned about. Or you could just put there, if a student is suspended for more than 10 schools, the following rules apply.
And add notice.
You can either add notice or
Yeah.
4A or 5A or whatever it
Yeah,
is. Yeah, just
okay.
add the notice over there.
I like the adding notice there and removing.
Because that's the only one that still applies, right?
Right.
I mean, I guess in theory, the steps of the administration still apply.
Right. 1, 2, and, or 1, 3, and 2, now that we're talking about flipping them, would still apply. But then 5
they're
only,
not the
5 only apply,
procedures.
yeah, 5 only apply, 5 is
Right.
the appeal for up to 10 days, and 6 is the appeal for 10 days, or more than 10 days.
Which is why I would keep that sentence that says students shall have the right to appeal through the appropriate levels of administration, because it
Right.
applies to both 5 and 6.
I'm not opposed to the sentence.
Yeah.
I am not sure that's the right place
That's-
for the sentence, I guess. I would agree that, like, I don't know where the right place is.
Well, it should probably go right before the procedures. If the principal or student concludes the student has engaged in misconduct, the procedures, if the principal or student concludes that the student has engaged in misconduct punishable by suspension, the student shall have the right to appeal through the appropriate levels of administration. The procedures described below apply.
Yeah.
I didn't get that, I'm sorry.
Yeah.
So where are you suggesting that be put? Okay.
So like that this sentence
Uh-huh.
comes out of here and
Goes
goes
after the
in
comma.
after the comma.
Ah.
So if the principal or superintendent believes the student is engaged in misconduct punishable by suspension, the student shall have the right to appeal.
Got
through
it.
the
Okay,
appropriate
got
levels
it.
of procedures
Now-
described
Which is
below
now gonna be in
apply.
3, not 2.
Right, new 3.
Being a teacher, and 3 is if it's, then they should, if the student has a disability. The word described at the end of 2 becoming 3 should be changed to referenced. Because we specifically voted to not put the description of those safeguards in policy JGE by my remembrance. We just reference them. Okay, then we go there. Then
Yeah, I agree with you there, yeah. Okay.
So I would go back to that, that to me feels much clearer. I think it seems like it still covers what the administration needs, but I will not speak for the administration. You can let us know that. But I guess my question still remains in terms of like, step 1, is that first appeal to the same, are we saying for like those smaller, shorter suspensions where they ideally have some sort of relationship, the principals, right, and administrators with the families, that we're allowing that first appeal to go to the principal or to the building administrator, like it has to be the principal, right, that made the decision? Or does that first appeal have to go to like an executive director, the chief schools officer, chief academic officer, or whichever version? Like, I'm not sure where it
Yeah,
goes.
we wanted to go first to that, administrator that dealt with it, because there are times that they may have misunderstood or not have gotten the full picture of it, so that's
Like
where we want
suspended,
to.
sent them home, and
Yeah.
then maybe additional information
Yeah.
comes to light, things like that. That makes sense to me.
So it should be changed though to any student who feels he or she has a justifiable appeal shall first appeal, same with appropriate building administrator?
Yeah.
Sure, yes.
I'm just confused because elsewhere we're talking about
And then it's not
parents,
to-
guardians, or others having custodial right to an appeal, and here it's just the student. Who has the right of appeal in this situation? Or who do we want to have the right of appeal in this situation? Is it only the student, or can a parent, guardian, or otherwise custodial parent?
It should be parent, guardian as well.
So
Not
then we
this-
need to take the
yeah.
language from 6A and put it into,
The student.
where it says in step 1.
So written appeals shall be submitted, reviewed at each level in the following manner. So building administrator, so then
And we need to
we
take
need
out,
to take out the sentence, right? The objective will be to resolve the matter informally at this level of contact, because they're already appealing, it's formal if they're appealing.
Correct.
And then complaint becomes appeal.
Yes.
So if I'm any student, parent, or guardian who feels he or she is a justifiable appeal shall first appeal the same with the appropriate building administrator? Is that
So
what we're
mimic 6A, it's or others having custodial care.
help me out here. 6A, okay,
The student, their
okay,
parents.
mimic 6A,
Guardians
got it.
or others
I'll
having
just write
custodial
that.
care, just to be consistent.
Okay, that's good. The appropriate supervisor building shall provide an appeal within, how many days did we
In
say?
writing within 2.
Within
is what-
2,
is
sorry,
what it
sorry, I'm
suggests
having
to do.
trouble reading.
2
Within
business days.
business days after the meeting.
Yes.
Is a business day the same as a school day? I mean, like
Yes.
if there's a teacher work day, or I guess in that,
It's a day that school is in session, for
Okay.
whatever reason.
a school business day.
Yes,
Perfect.
So if it's a teacher workday, that's a business day.
Yes, 'cause
If it's student, whether the students are present or not, it's a business day.
Because we open for
That's-
that.
Okay.
The appropriate supervisor or building administrator,
Has to be the principal, right?
should it, well, the first sentence, Is
The appropriate building
same
administrator.
with the appropriate building administrator, we don't mention the supervisor.
Right.
So should it be the appropriate building administrator shall
Yeah.
provide an answer?
To reflect the same language. I agree.
So remove the word
What one are you
supervisor or,
Step one,
Down here.
yeah.
Those individuals are gonna be building administrators.
So step one, so just conceptually, step one is you have how many days, how many days to appeal it to the building?
Doesn't say.
it doesn't say.
Oh, step one.
Okay, step one does not say how many days you have, so at some point in the process of being suspended, you file that, the building administrator reviews it, and then within 2 business days, we'll send a written notice to the parent after hearing the appeal.
How is the written notice sent? Because snail mail can take 10 days.
Typically via email, some parents prefer text. We do sometimes send a snail mail just because that's a record that we have legally.
Do you ever send it certified?
We do,
Occasionally?
someone can refuse to
Of course.
sign that, but my understanding of the law, and Grant can correct me, is once we mail it, the presumption is that.
Yes,
I mean, we
although-
can't force them to open it and read it.
Yeah, I mean, none of this is in statute, so this is all whatever you all want it to be.
And where we have to be careful, is, let's say we suspend for 1 day, and that parent says, I wanna appeal it. When are they gonna appeal it? By the time they
Right.
come back, or let's say we suspend for 2 days. 2 days,
So
that-
should the suspension be paused until the appeal process is complete?
Well, there is,
I'm just asking, I have no
Can't do that.
view
It's
on it
something that
either
we
way.
just- Yeah, can't do it on property.
Yeah, that makes, you make a good point, but
Yeah.
it's
So,
a
so
conundrum.
that's really, that's why we say within 2 days.
Right.
Of it, that gives the administrator enough time, but there's so much variation in how much time they could be, suspended for, it makes it a little tricky.
Oh, but I think it's still I guess here's, okay, so let's say it gets suspended for a day. And then you appeal it and you win your appeal, even though you've already missed that day. It's still important for the purposes of your record and getting into college and whether you know, so I think it's still a relevant appeal.
Yeah, yes, it is, and what happens if the appeal gets,
Well, they've already served it, so.
Right, then you have to expunge records and things like that. But I think that the issue here is, if we start cornering ourselves and we say within X amount of time, that's when, again, we start getting into, is this a policy violation or not?
Right. Well,
I mean, I think the point of having it is to ensure that it does happen in that amount of time. I mean, I think that's why, right, like you all added in instead of the 5 days, the 2 days, because
yeah,
if you have
yeah.
the smaller thing, so, and up further, I think, to Ann's point, right, like if we're talking about just like prompt notification, I think that's a reasonable understanding. I'm sure somebody could decide to argue it, but I assume, maybe I shouldn't do that, that if it's like a 1 or 2 day suspension, that's not gonna be the issue. I don't know.
okay, well, in hearing all of this, should it say within 2 days of notice? That they have this appeal right, or should it just not
2
give
days
it
is
time?
fast.
Yeah,
Yes.
I'm,
really
Yeah.
Well, but if
I'm
it's
good.
an under 10 days
Yeah.
if it's an up to 10 day suspension,
Yeah.
and you're actually trying to appeal it to get back into school,
So let's
you
just,
have to file the appeal.
right, no,
It's
I
more than
understand what
3
you're
days
saying,
to
but
begin
let's
with.
just, I actually heard about a situation where somebody didn't know that they had an appeal and, you know, then later were unable to appeal it, just to get it off their record later. So I think there's 2 things at play here. One is the not serving the suspension, but the other might be the record situation. But also, I just wanna play it through. So right now, principal decides you're getting suspended for 3 days, right? Then official notification shall be made to the parents, but I don't know who's making that notification, so that needs to be changed from passive voice. Somebody's notifying the parents, right, promptly. And then they have 2 days to appeal it? Cause if I wanna seek counsel or do anything like that, that's not a lot of time. And if I'm not, and if I'm, working a 24-hour shift or a 12-hour shift, it's not a lot of time. And then 2 days to get back. It's, no matter what you do, it's gonna be 4 days. Is you're not going, the appealing is not about not serving the suspension, I'm afraid.
Okay.
Well,
It's about
and it
the
very
record.
well may be, I mean, I haven't spoken to MSBA, but that
That might be
this
why they
whole
don't have
time
it.
frame here might be the reason why they don't even address doing any sort of appeal up to 10 days. Because
10
of
days
the
is
time
2
frame.
weeks.
But I think it's so much more important that they can appeal it for purposes of their record than the serving of
No, I
the
understand.
suspension.
I understand what you're
That's why we
saying,
should have
yeah.
it, and so I don't think we should be as like, oh my God, it has to be done in 4 days, because
Right.
I don't think we're gonna make it.
So, I think we were saying the response in 2 days from administration is good. The two questions that I'm hearing is, one, how much time do they have to
Yeah.
make the appeal? And that's when, that's really, that's a tough one. And to me, in a way, should be left open, because a parent may decide, I wanna appeal 5 days down the road, or it may be a month down the road.
Right?
I don't think it'll be fair for us to say, okay, I'm sorry, you missed your appeal window, so we go on, because additional things may start
Is
cropping
anyone
up.
saying they should? I thought all of it.
Oh, no.
I
was
threw
about
something
like-
out for discussion, but I think
Okay,
what I'm
sorry.
hearing is that we all agree, is that it seems like the consensus is that for the step one appeal, there's not necessarily an appeal deadline.
Right.
On the student and parent guardians.
On the student and parent guardian appealing to the principal themselves, there's not necessarily a deadline, because we still have a step two deadline that we have to discuss potentially.
Yes.
But, and I would say, to address something Ann, you said, I think that in the written notice, it should say a brief summary of the situation, the reason for the suspension, and the appeal process.
Yes.
Because
Definitely.
you just said,
Yeah.
you know of somebody who did not understand that they had an appeal.
That's right,
So
yeah.
that should be in the written notice.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's good.
And so
But
I
it should
think,
still not be passive. Who's responsible for the official notification?
Be the administrator of record.
So it
Okay.
should say, the administrator should,
so the
promptly notify.
the appropriate building administrator?
Yeah.
Because that's what we, okay.
well, it could be the superintendent as well. It's for up to 10 days.
Okay,
Should not come to you.
No.
Oh, no, superintendent can't do up to 10, they can only
Right.
do over 10. No, sorry, my bad.
okay, so
Also do up to 10.
remove, make
You may
active.
not suspend people for less than 10 days.
Okay, so we're gonna make A active. Step one does not have does not have a time frame. So are we ready to move on to step two?
Sure.
Step two, it does say 2 days in step two.
If the
Are we-
appeal is not resolved in step one,
Mm-hmm.
then the student, parent, guardian,
Right.
all that 6A,
Yep,
may within 2 business days present a written appeal together with a copy of step one and reply. But we
To
have
whom?
no idea who we're giving that appeal to.
To the appropriate,
But also, there was no like,
to the appropriate building.
But it's no longer the building. They've already appealed to the building administrator, which even though we're not saying principal.
Oh.
The law says the principal is doing the suspension. There is
Right.
no one above the principal.
Right. So it has to be the principal. If the
They've
law says.
already been appealed to.
that was step one.
Well, you're right, and it could be a building administrator, it could be principal, but I hear what you're saying. So we do need to have something in here for step two. So could that be the executive director who is then the supervisor of the building administrator or principal? So that would be the next one up, the appropriate executive director.
Yes. But this is what came up last time too, and this is my, I guess, the legal question. it says, in Missouri, a principal may suspend a student for up to 10 school days. Who is a principal? Does that include an assistant principal?
It says here,
Yes, it's a short answer.
yes, a principal, not the principal. That's the difference.
Okay. So then, in that situation, if it was, for example, an assistant principal that did the original one, should the step one appeal specifically go to the principal, so that if it were the assistant principal, it now does jump a level and goes to the principal? If it was the principal, it gives the principal an opportunity to review it, and then step two takes it out of the building to the next person, because otherwise you potentially have a situation where you skip the principal, which doesn't feel right.
I think we're overcomplicating it then, because then there's 3 appeals for a.
No, just make this principal, that's it.
Instead of building administrator,
Instead of
make it
building
principal.
administrator,
Oh,
just
okay.
make
So-
it
so-
principal, and
so-
then it doesn't matter
Oh,
whether
okay,
it
I
was
see,
the
I see,
assistant or
I
the.
see, I see what you're
Well, for step one, it's
The building
okay if they appeal it to the person that dealt with them. So if you have an assistant principal who says, hey, you're suspended for 3 days, it's okay to appeal it to the one who has all the facts. That's where you want to start from. The second step is now, let's go to the next level. So let's say the assistant principal did it, it goes up to the principal. Let's say the principal did it, then it goes to the next level of administration.
Not in one,
Not the way it's written here.
not in one.
I mean, I guess that's the question, is if the goal is, because then somebody's appeal process is a different length of time depending on whether it was the principal or the assistant principal that talked to them.
It should be within it should be within
They
this.
have the additional steps. If they have to go to the assistant principal, then the principal, then the executive director,
Right,
or if the principal dealt with them, they just go the principal to the executive director.
right.
So they have 2 less days.
They have less, it's a different process, and that, I think, gets confusing.
Right, because on suspensions, you are gonna have assistant principals suspended 1 or 2 days, because it says a principal, they are a principal, they're not the principal.
Right, I guess the question is, who does the next appeal go to?
The next level up,
Or the
next.
first appeal. So you're saying you think administratively, which I don't disagree with, right? That somebody has all the facts and somebody doesn't, like, or although hopefully they've been informed, right? So you're saying the first appeal, it sounds like, right, like always goes in this situation to the administrator that made the decision to suspend them.
yes.
So then the question becomes, who does the second appeal?
The supervisor of that administrator.
I guess I feel like that complicates things, and I also don't wanna skip the principal if it was the assistant principal, which was why I had suggested step one, just go to the principal.
So the direct supervisor of that individual. So if an assistant principal does it, it goes to the principal, who's the direct supervisor. If a principal does it on step 2, it goes to the direct supervisor of that principal, which would be an executive director.
You're saying, what if we just said the principal is the first?
For the step one
for the-
appeal,
For the step one appeal, the building principal is that step one appeal. And
then step,
expect that the assistant principal will have either be
Informed.
present or will have informed them.
right,
Because
but
for
it
buildings
keeps it
that
in.
don't have assistant principals, I think is what I'm hearing you say. So
Well,
if it's a building that doesn't have an assistant principal, their appeal is to the principal and then the executive director. If it's a building with an assistant principal, their appeal is assistant principal, principal, executive.
At this point, I think you're gonna have to think about a lot of this, so I think take this suggestion and think about it, because I think that right now we're talking about mini threads. And so consider what Jean said.
Yeah.
When we start, because I think we're gonna have to throw this back to administration for drafting, so just consider what I think what we're saying is considering what the notices
Right.
and the answers are gonna say, because I think as long as we tell them who the next person is in the appeal process,
Right.
that's fine, we just need to make sure we're clear in here what that process is.
Well, we wanna make sure that the process isn't different depending on who
Right.
suspended you, because if it's the assistant principal and we follow one of the methods talked about, they get 1, 2, 3, 4 shots at appeal, and if it's the principal, you only get 3 shots.
I
at
think
appeal.
as written here, you get step 1 and 2. So the question is
And that's
what, and that's it. So the question is who are those 2 people?
Got it.
Who hear those 2 appeals?
Yeah, definitely.
Because that's what I'm hearing. We don't wanna add extra steps.
Right.
So it's just gonna be step 1 and step 2, who hears those 2 appeals? And I think that needs to be determined what we wanna see in policy, and I think you need to consider that without I mean, we're giving you suggestions, but I think you need to figure out, do I wanna have principal, then executive director, or do I just wanna say supervisor of that person? Think about how you wanna do it, because think about how the letter will look to the parent that
Yeah.
goes out.
Yeah, I'll just say, I think that was key if we're gonna add in that, like, the reason for the suspension and the appeals process, that part of the appeals process needs to include the actual person, not just the position. Because if you send a letter to someone saying, like, you need to send your appeal, then the next person that hears your appeal is the executive director of secondary education, that means nothing to me.
Right.
Right.
Send it to this email address.
So our letters that go home when a student is suspended, particularly if they're recommended for an extended, longer than 10 days, always have the buck stops here person at the bottom. So it's the principal, even if the assistant principal has been more intimately involved in the situation, it's the principal.
Who
So
does the actual suspension?
whose name is on that letter and will be aware of the situation. So
That makes
seemingly
everything a
to
lot
appeal, it's principal and executive director are your two
That would be a lot easier.
people. It just
Okay.
seems cleaner because that, at the end of the day, the principal is gonna be responsible for what happens in the building.
Thank you.
I think, like Carla said last time, streamlining and stuff, I mean, we took it down from 5 steps to
No,
2.
I deeply appreciate the work that,
And I think on-
I agree. This is a process that I think we can explain. I'm not sure I could have explained the prior process. So I like what is being done, even if we're nitpicking it to death, because that's what we do in this committee.
Well, and when you're thinking about who those appeals go to,
Right.
the other question is, because what I'm hearing is if the suspension came from the assistant principal, do we want the buck to stop in the building? Because potentially it could, and I don't know. So that's something to think about. Okay.
I think that's why your first appeal would be principal, because that's your
Right,
I think that
buck
makes
stops here
sense.
person.
But-
like what Jean was saying,
Right.
yeah.
All right, knowing this is gonna have to go back to admin, are there any other comments we want to give to Dr. Yearwood and Ms. London?
or just Miss London,
Yeah.
Or just Ms. London?
just to call it we didn't even get started on number 6.
I was gonna
No,
say,
I'm
yeah, I
just
feel like.
Yeah, six is a process that in my
I feel like
opinion, we did add a new A in there because of the removal of 4. So there are some notes we have on that, but I think that getting rid of the also actually clears up that 5 doesn't apply, which is, I think, what a lot of people who I've heard from were very confused about. Do I have to start here, or do I start here? What is my process? And I think that,
Absolutely.
yeah. So, so is there any objection to sending the notes back to admin, and admin will send it back to us in the next couple of meetings? And we'll just keep it on the agenda, but understand that you may not be able to get to us for a month or 2.
Okay.
Is that reasonable?
Yes, sir. It's
Okay.
perfect.
Okay.
Are we moving it?
We're moving it to next month's agenda, but with the understanding that it might not be ready for finalization next month. And I can give you my notes if you want my notes. You may have to.
I do want your notes on that one, but I will watch the movie too.
With the hope that it will be ready.
Okay, policy KK, we still have some disagreement on that one, and so it's gonna be moved to next month, at the request of admin.
When we're moving it, only because I wasn't at the last meeting, I guess I have a quick question about it to make sure that this is where the disagreement still is. And that is that it is not in any way a violation of FERPA is that where the disagreement still
The
lies?
disagreement is in the FERPA statement, and that it is not a violation of FERPA for parent
I
observation
mean, there
within the
are
classroom.
Department of Education letters on this topic.
Right, there
Okay.
are requirements in chapter 20 that
Okay, so
explicitly allow for.
so the disagreement is what
allow
I
for
disagree
that.
with as well, then.
And there are Supreme Court cases that address this
Okay.
also, so yes,
Right.
if you want me to
No,
go
we don't
into
need to
it,
go
I'd be
into
more
it.
than happy to go into
So I
that,
do
so.
think we want to consider the fact that ours says may, Grant and I had some conversation about that, and I think our communications director had sent some pretty relevant information about what's being discussed in a classroom, and someone with potentially less than,
Still not an
Oh,
educational record.
absolutely.
It is
And-
not an educational record.
if I'm going
That's
through over your grades or going over.
Yeah, And
assessment
that's,
with you.
that's, some of that is actually addressed
We're
in
tabled,
chapter
so
20.
we can talk
in
about it, and
chapter
I'll look
20.
into
Yeah, if he'll say
You
that,
can,
that'd
you
be
can
awesome.
remove people from the classroom or not allow them to do classroom observation if they
Yes.
have those sort of things, but classroom observation in and of itself is not a violation of FERPA.
And I just, because I wasn't here last month, I just want to reiterate one more time to administration that this policy has kept the educational policy law students from observing classrooms. Because the principals say, no, it might be a violation of FERPA if educational law policy students come in. Because it says it in this policy, and that's why I'm fighting hard for
So
it.
my
'cause
recommendation on that would be to have them maybe call a peer for some clarification.
I mean, I talked to 4 principals, and they were all,
There is,
no.
and the model policy for
Okay.
the Missouri School Boards Association actually allows for classroom observation in that sentence. This sentence is not a sentence from the core policy.
Right, because it would be wrong on the law. if it was.
Right, no, that's,
Principal
I
says advocates,
totally agree.
even advocates can't come, Springfield's got in their policy. So that's interesting, so yeah, would love to see whatever your legal stuff.
Yeah, I mean, I'm sure
Okay.
Grant can pull
Yeah.
the letters that the Department of Education has strongly stated that districts and, that A, FERPA is not affected, and B, that it's a Dear Mama's letter. If you're looking for it, Grant, I can send you a copy of it.
I know what you're referring to.
Yeah, I think it's pretty clear that they say they should work together to
Right.
allow classroom observation.
And in fact, it's actually mandated under certain things within chapter 20. There, it's actually, it is actually one of the ways that parents can participate in the education process. It actually says classroom observation, so,
We list that, but that's encouraged.
yeah,
in our
yeah.
policy.
So anyway, moving on to E. JHDF, and I realize we're getting to the 2-hour point, so we may.
I'm not sure I have that.
Should be,
I have KK.
no, was that one pulled?
I did not include it since we're not.
Oh, is that one also moving to the next month's meeting?
I thought there was an email, yeah.
JHDF,
Oh, I'm sorry, that one's also being moved to next month's meeting. I apologize, I'm, again, eyesight, my problem. So I think that concludes the unfinished business. So let's move on to the new business and start with the wellness policy.
Did Bridget have to leave?
She had to pick her daughter.
Is
Where
that
is that?
supposed to be under section 6?
It's under 4.
Under 4?
or under
Oh, yeah, please, come on.
policies for consent agenda.
Yeah, gotcha.
It's finally up.
Okay, so we'll. Oh, you guys good? I just want to make sure. Okay. So I guess let's go ahead and have the discussion first. So, yeah, I think you have something to say.
Oh,
Do you, I mean,
no.
are you?
Well, I mean, here's what I have to say, is that there are some missing things in the MSBA policy that are federally required. And what you will see in green, and I assume you have that same copy, what you see in green are those things. They're very simple fixes, so that's what Bridget and I are recommending to be added.
I was
there
gonna
any-
say, as someone on the wellness
Right.
committee, that was what was discussed in our
Yeah.
final meeting, so I had not pulled stuff up when I know there was some concern because there was a previous sort of model policy which was much, much longer and based on like a different thing that had been presented a number of months ago. And I think there were some folks that thought that was what was supposed to be submitted. I know that I knew that like changes had been submitted. I had not actually looked to see what was on the agenda at the time yet. So I think, I'll just say that like the Wellness Committee discussed this and it was very clear in the presentations that were given in terms of like highlighting which pieces were needed and not needed and how it was getting.
And so the
Added
wellness
in.
committee added things that are required by law, but were missing from our the MSBA recommendations, correct?
Yes.
Cool.
Now, is the longer document, I was a little confused from emails that I happened to be copied on. Is that going to be part of the internal administrative procedure? Or-
Right, the procedures, yeah, that really long document actually addresses how we're going to meet this law.
That's what I thought.
That's what I assumed based on the correspondence, but I think I was left off of I was just copied on a couple of the emails, and so it was very confusing to me what was going on. So
Sure.
I appreciate the clarification.
Absolutely.
Yeah,
I love the water being available.
yeah.
I think that's super important.
It is.
All right, is there any other discussion or question or a motion?
Did we do that?
You have to know, it's in policy.
Wait, hold on. I think I did have one question,
Okay.
of course, because under the wellness committee, it says the district will establish, it consists of one parent, student, nurse, or other health professional, PE teacher, school food representative, board member, school administrator, member of the public, other community member. And then under wellness program coordinator, the board designates the individual as the wellness program coordinator, director of nutrition services. And I know you're also a food service representative, but should we specifically outline under the wellness committee that the director of nutrition services, because only a person who's on the wellness committee can be the coordinator?
Not to throw a wrench in things, but are you still technically the coordinator or is Bridget considered the coordinator?
I am, what it says here, it says the Director of Nutrition Services is the coordinator, but she is truly the coordinator. It comes out of National School Lunch Law, is what it is. So, I mean,
Okay.
that's a decision you can make. If you'd like to change it, I'm not opposed.
Well, I don't know what is required by law. Like,
Right.
By law, is the director of nutrition services required to be the coordinator? Or can we say like director of nutrition services or designee, and then your designee becomes our wellness?
Sure, that would probably be more
Coordinator.
appropriate.
But I think we just would wanna make sure that legally that is
Yeah, what's
okay.
federal law say?
Because like, just in case, because I know there's a lot, especially with this policy in the wellness committee, that is sort of wrapped up in some of those federal requirements. So that would be,
I mean, for example, your designee could be anybody. So, we could
right,
designate, the principal at Ridgeway, or somebody, and that might not comply with the federal law.
right.
So
So
I
I
don't-
guess I would be curious I don't know where to look that up. That's why I'm looking this direction towards
I don't know the
lawyers
answer
and
off the top of my head
administrators.
what the implications are, but I'm happy to confirm. I would say that if you put the phrase or designee, it would be up to the district to make sure the designee was a lawful choice as opposed to just.
Right, so either way, we still need to know.
Right, which I'm just saying from the purpose of the language, I can look up the answer. I don't have the answer off the top of my head.
Right.
Yeah. Okay, so are you suggesting we add comma or designee to Director of Nutrition Services there?
I mean, I think that would perhaps provide some flexibility
I think
so
it
that Lena could designate a different school food service representative if that became necessary at some point as well.
And I'll always be at the meetings.
Yeah.
I'll always be a part of it.
I want you at the meetings. I am not trying to get rid of you
I
at the
didn't think
meetings.
so.
I'm just saying, like, you are a very busy person.
Right.
You have a lot on your plate too, so just trying to figure out, like, if we, in practicality right now, especially have this other position that is serving that function, can we provide some flexibility in our policy to reflect that?
I think we can.
I like
So
G.
Okay, so under wellness program coordinator, the first sentence before the period, add or designate.
and then we just need to
And
Make sure.
then we will
Find out
just
what-
confirm.
Will do.
Okay. Is there any other discussion or a motion?
I would move to approve with the changes.
amended?
As amended.
Second.
All right, all in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? All right. Good. Moving right along to
3 years in the making.
GBE.
The
Oh, whoops, am I looking at that right?
GBE.
Yes, GBE,
Mhm.
okay.
Staff health and safety, these are changes that are just made to align with MSBA's current policy.
Okay. And this one we've talked about before, I think, didn't we in another meeting, or did we
I think
not?
we referenced it.
Okay.
It might have been in the universal EBB that we
Oh,
referenced earlier.
that's right,
Uh-huh.
because whenever we added that, okay.
Mr. Chair,
Yeah.
our meeting was scheduled from 4:30 to 6.
Okay, if you feel, I will entertain a motion if somebody needs to leave, certainly, I said it earlier and then I forgot that was going to mention it. We typically do adjourn before now. So if I'm willing to move the stuff to next month if necessary. Is that?
I just wanna put out something that needs to be looked at for next month.
Okay,
Before. So if we don't wanna deal with GBE now, we can move that to next month. But on GBH, when I sent those changes, it also had a section called missing exceptions. It's missing the section I submitted that is called exceptions to this policy. And it's also missing the section called consequences that was located prior to the word reporting on page 3.
and that was in my notes too, that there are no exceptions under what was added to GBH, which means that there's no exceptions for family under that. And the exceptions that April is talking about include exceptions for family. And I think that's very important in this policy, because otherwise a parent who is a teacher would not be able to sleep in the same hotel room as their child under that. So if that could be looked at.
So, yeah, if you could
certainly
just
I would-
come back
I
with
think it's in the
all of
MSBA, I
my-
think it was just left out.
Yeah, I mean, I sent it with all the sticky note
Yeah.
and it had all of that. It just didn't get copied and pasted into
Yeah,
this.
yep, I agree.
So that was it.
Okay.
You have an email, April, where you say, just to clarify, administration didn't want to include the item entitled consequences from the document sent that is included in MSBA.
Right, that was a question that I had because I
Oh, it's a
noticed
question, okay.
that I wasn't, I probably, yeah,
Okay.
I don't always speak English.
Well,
Okay.
is that coming back as tier 1 or tier 2? GBH?
I think that would be the decision that we would, usually that would probably come under a tier 1, but if we decide we recommend for a tier 2, certainly I think that would be appropriate for this change.
There's a really long list of things that I am very concerned about, lots of things on the
Okay.
list. Where did they come from?
So this was one of those policies I was
So I can think
reviewing,
about it before the next meeting.
thinking that there would be no changes needed. And when I went and I compared it with MSBA's changes.
It's a service.
MSBA's policy, MSBA has 3 sections in their policy. Exceptions to this policy, the one that is in here, which is failure to maintain boundaries. And then the other section, consequences.
Got it.
Those are 3 sections that are in the current MSBA policy, which is what resulted in these things.
I think we have a lot of talking to do about
Yeah,
the.
April, can you
failure
go
to
ahead and
maintain
send everybody
Send it again.
the core policy so that, because I think that probably clears up at least some of your questions, because that was my issue, was with no exceptions, we have a problem.
Do
Yeah,
I
so maybe
need
that's it,
to-
because I read it without exceptions.
Right.
Right,
I think
and
that's,
Should I
right.
send the document again that I had sent with the edits?
Sure.
I don't think I was on any of those meetings.
You might not have been on that one.
Okay.
I think maybe
But,
this
but
is-
let's make sure everyone has seen MSBA core so
Yeah.
that we can have that discussion.
And if you don't mind looping me into those, then I'll think about it more before the next meeting.
All right, do we have a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? All right. Thank
That
you
means
so much.
everything else moves to next.
Everything else moves to the next, moves to unfinished business, and we move forward from there.
So it's 1:09.